JikookVerse family, welcome back to JikookVerse. Today, we have a story that is going to hit a very different part of your heart, because the words coming from Jungkook were not the kind of words anyone expected to hear during a casual weverse live. And if you are a Jikook fan, you already know why this particular moment feels so emotional. Jungkook was simply talking during his live, answering comments, laughing at some messages, and sharing those little pieces of his day that fans have always loved. There was no dramatic setup. There was no warning that something unforgettable was about to be said. But then the conversation turned toward Jimin, and suddenly, the atmosphere changed. Jungkook paused for a moment before talking about him, and what he said next left fans completely stunned. According to this fictional scenario, Jungkook described Jimin as half of his heart. Yes, you heard that correctly. Half of his heart. And those few words carried so much emotion that fans immediately began looking at everything Jungkook had said before in a completely different way. Because when someone uses a phrase that personal, especially while talking about someone they have shared so many years with, it naturally makes people stop and listen. Jungkook did not rush through the thought. Instead, he seemed to take his time, almost as if he was trying to find the right words. He talked about how some people enter your life and become so deeply connected to your memories that it becomes difficult to imagine certain chapters without them. And when Jungkook spoke about Jimin, that was exactly the feeling he described. He explained that Jimin had been present through so many different versions of him. The younger Jungkook, the nervous Jungkook, the ambitious Jungkook, the Jungkook who was still learning how to understand himself, and the Jungkook who eventually became confident enough to stand on enormous stages in front of millions of people. Through all of those changes, Jimin remained someone he could look toward. That was the part that made this fictional confession feel so powerful. Because Jungkook was not simply talking about a colleague. He was talking about someone who had become part of his personal history, and then came the sentence that changed everything. Jungkook said that Jimin felt like half of his heart. For a moment, imagine being a fan listening to that live. You are watching casually. Maybe you are doing something else while the live plays in the background. Then you hear those words, half of my heart. And suddenly, you are no longer casually watching anything. You are replaying the moment. You are thinking about every interaction, every smile, every time Jungkook looked for Jimin on stage, every time Jimin seemed to notice Jungkook before anyone else, every tiny memory that fans have collected over the years. And suddenly, all of those memories feel connected by one emotional sentence. But what made the confession even more unexpected was the way Jungkook explained what he meant. He did not describe Jimin as someone who simply made him happy. Instead, he talked about Jimin as someone who understood parts of him without requiring long explanations. He described those quiet moments when two people can communicate without saying much. And according to the scenario, Jungkook said that sometimes Jimin knows what he is feeling just by looking at him. That statement alone would have been enough to make JikookVerse family emotional. But Jungkook continued. He talked about growing up together. He talked about being young and having no idea what the future would look like. He talked about how strange it was to realize that so many of the people who stood beside him during those early years had become permanent memories in his life. And when he reached Jimin, his tone became noticeably softer. Jungkook explained that there are people you meet because of circumstances, but there are also people who become part of who you are. He said Jimin was one of those people for him. And that is where the phrase half of my heart suddenly made sense. Because Jungkook was not talking about a single moment. He was talking about years, years of rehearsals, years of traveling, years of performances, years of laughter, years of difficult days, years of watching each other change. And perhaps that is why the confession feels so much more emotional than a simple compliment. A compliment can disappear after a few seconds. But describing someone as half of your heart suggests something much deeper. It suggests history. It suggests familiarity. It suggests that person has occupied a meaningful space in your life for so long that their presence feels almost inseparable from your memories. And fans could not help but remember how young Jungkook and Jimin were when they first started this journey together. They were not the people we see today. They were still figuring everything out. They were learning choreography, learning how to perform, learning how to handle pressure, learning how to grow in front of an audience that became larger and larger. And somewhere inside that enormous journey, their bond became one of the things fans continued to notice. Jungkook then reportedly talked about something else that made the moment even more emotional. He said that Jimin had seen him at his happiest, but he had also seen him during difficult moments. And there is something powerful about being known in both situations. Anyone can celebrate your victories, but the people who remain during the difficult chapters often become the ones you remember differently. Jungkook described Jimin as someone who had seen different sides of him: the playful side, the serious side, the stubborn side, the quiet side, and even the side that did not always know what to say. He suggested that Jimin had been there long enough to recognize those differences without needing an explanation. Then Jungkook smiled. And according to the scenario, that smile was what made the entire confession even more unforgettable, because it did not feel like he was trying to create a dramatic moment. It felt natural, almost accidental, as if the words came out because he was genuinely thinking about Jimin in that moment. And that is exactly why the fictional scene becomes so interesting. The most emotional statements are not always the ones delivered with dramatic speeches. Sometimes they are the quiet sentences, the words that come out when someone stops thinking about how they sound and simply says what is in their heart. Jungkook's statement about Jimin being half of his heart falls into that category. And JikookVerse family, let's talk about why those words hit so differently. Because there is a huge difference between saying someone is important to you and saying that person represents half of your heart. The first statement describes affection. The second describes emotional significance. It suggests that the person is connected to your identity, your memories, and the way you understand your own journey. And for fans who have followed Jungkook and Jimin for years, that distinction makes the moment feel enormous. Another detail from the fictional live made the confession even more unexpected. Jungkook reportedly admitted that he does not always say everything he feels. He explained that some emotions are easier to carry than to explain. And sometimes, when you have known someone for a very long time, you assume they already understand. That line is especially interesting when connected to Jimin. Because Jungkook and Jimin have spent so many years around each other, that the relationship between them is built on countless experiences that fans will never fully see. There are conversations that happen away from cameras. There are jokes that only make sense to the people involved. There are memories created during long flights, rehearsals, waiting rooms, backstage moments, hotel rooms, and ordinary days. Fans only see fragments. The people involved live the entire story. And that is why a single sentence can sometimes feel much larger than the sentence itself. When Jungkook called Jimin half of his heart, fans naturally began wondering about all the memories behind those words. What moments did he remember? What difficult days did they survive together? What ordinary moments became meaningful simply because they happened with someone who mattered? Those are questions that make this fictional scenario so emotional. Because the confession is not really about one sentence. It is about everything that sentence represents. Jungkook then continued by describing Jimin as someone who could make ordinary moments feel lighter. He talked about laughing over things that other people might not understand. He talked about the comfort of being around someone without needing to constantly entertain them. And he emphasized something that many people can relate to. Sometimes the strongest connections are not built through extraordinary events. They are built through ordinary days, eating together, talking late at night, sharing jokes, complaining about exhaustion, encouraging each other, sitting quietly in the same room. Those little things eventually become memories. And when Jungkook spoke about Jimin in this way, it made the phrase "half of my heart" sound less like a dramatic expression and more like the result of years of shared experiences. Then came another emotional moment. Jungkook reportedly said that if he had to choose one thing he appreciated most about Jimin, it would be the fact that Jimin had always been himself. Not perfect, not constantly serious, not always confident, just Jimin. And that kind of appreciation can be incredibly meaningful. Because it means loving or valuing someone not because they are flawless, but because their personality itself has become familiar and precious to you. Jungkook described Jimin as someone who could be affectionate one minute and completely chaotic the next. Someone who could tease him and then immediately worry about whether he was okay. Someone who could make him laugh when he did not feel like laughing. And according to the scenario, Jungkook said that those small contradictions were exactly what made Jimin special. He did not want Jimin to become someone else. He appreciated him as he was. And once again, fans were left with that same question. How could a casual weverse live suddenly become this emotional? The answer is simple. Sometimes the most powerful moments happen when there is no expectation for something big to happen. Jungkook was not standing on a stage delivering a prepared speech. He was not reading a script. He was simply talking. And in this fictional scenario, that is precisely what made the confession feel so intimate. There was another part of the conversation that fans would remember. Jungkook explained that time changes people. Everyone grows. Everyone develops different dreams. Everyone eventually discovers different sides of themselves. But some people remain connected to your earliest memories. And for him, Jimin was one of those people. He said that when he thinks about his younger years, Jimin is automatically somewhere in those memories. That statement carries a different kind of emotion. Because it is not only about the present, it is about nostalgia. Imagine looking back at years of your life and realizing that one person appears in so many chapters. That person becomes connected to your youth, your growth, your mistakes, your victories, your fears, your laughter, and your dreams. That is what makes the idea of someone being half of your heart so powerful. Not because it necessarily has to be interpreted in one specific way, but because it communicates an extraordinary level of emotional importance. And that is exactly how this fictional Jungkook confession should be understood. As a declaration of deep affection, gratitude, and history, Jungkook then reportedly laughed and tried to move the conversation forward. But by that point, the damage was already done. Jikook fans were emotionally destroyed. The comments were moving faster. People were replaying the moment. Others were trying to understand exactly what Jungkook meant. Some fans were simply sitting there with tears in their eyes because the words felt so sincere. And honestly, who could blame them? When someone says that another person represents half of their heart, it is almost impossible not to feel something. But perhaps the most beautiful part of the fictional story is that Jungkook did not describe Jimin as someone who completed him because he was incomplete. Instead, the sentiment was closer to this. Jungkook was already himself. He had his own identity, his own dreams, his own strengths, but Jimin occupied a deeply meaningful part of the journey that created the person he became. And that distinction matters. Because it turns the confession into something about companionship rather than dependence. It is about having someone who walked beside you while you became yourself. Someone whose presence became part of your memories. Someone you can look back on and say, you were there, you saw it all. You remember what it was like. And maybe that is what Jungkook was really trying to express. Not just that Jimin matters, but that Jimin has been there for so much of his life that the memories almost feel incomplete without him. That is a powerful thought. And for JikookVerse family, it is probably the part of this story that deserves the most attention, because sometimes fans focus on big moments, big performances, big reactions, big gestures, but relationships are often defined by the tiny details. The person you look for when you enter a room. The person who understands your joke without explanation. The person who knows when you are tired. The person who can make you laugh after a difficult day. The person whose presence feels familiar even when everything around you has changed. In this fictional scenario, Jungkook's description of Jimin captured exactly that kind of connection. And then, just when fans thought the confession could not become more emotional, Jungkook reportedly added one final thought. He said that no matter how much life changes, there will always be people you carry with you. People who become part of your story. People you may never be able to describe perfectly because the history is too big for a few words. And he looked emotional when talking about Jimin. That final moment made the entire confession feel less like a shocking statement and more like a reflection on everything they had experienced together. Years of memories, years of growth, years of change, and one friendship that remained deeply meaningful. So when Jungkook called Jimin half of his heart, fans did not just hear 5 words. They heard years of history behind them. They heard the memories of 2 young people growing up together. They heard the laughter, the teasing, the support, the difficult moments, the achievements, and all those ordinary days that eventually become the most precious memories. That is why this fictional confession has such an emotional impact. It is not about proving anything. It is not about forcing one interpretation. It is about recognizing how meaningful a long-term bond can become. And honestly, there is something beautiful about that. Because at the end of the day, the people who stay through different chapters of our lives often become impossible to separate from our memories. Jungkook and Jimin's fictional conversation gives us a chance to imagine what it would sound like if someone tried to put that kind of bond into words. And perhaps the reason fans reacted so strongly is because the phrase was simple. Half of my heart. No complicated explanation. No dramatic metaphor. Just a few words carrying years of emotion. And sometimes that is enough. JikookVerse family, if you have been following this story from the beginning, you already understand why that sentence would become the line everyone remembers. Because Jimin was not described as a temporary part of Jungkook's life. He was described as someone connected to the journey itself, someone who witnessed the transformation, someone who knew the younger version and the older version, someone who could remember where the journey started. And that is a rare kind of connection. Life changes, people change, careers change, circumstances change, but memories remain. And when those memories are shared with someone who has been beside you for years, that person can become incredibly important. So perhaps the biggest takeaway from Jungkook's fictional confession is not simply that he called Jimin half of his heart. It is what came before and after those words. The years, the trust, the familiarity, the laughter, the quiet support, the shared history, and the understanding that sometimes one person can become connected to so many chapters of your life that talking about your past naturally means talking about them too. That is what makes this story so emotional. And that is why the JikookVerse family is going to remember this moment. Not because it was loud, not because it was dramatic, but because it was unexpectedly tender. A simple conversation became something fans would replay again and again, and one sentence became the emotional center of the entire live. Jungkook's confession about Jimin being half of his heart was unexpected. It was vulnerable, it was nostalgic, and most importantly, it captured the idea of 2 people who had grown through countless chapters together. Whether you are a longtime Jikook supporter or someone who is discovering these moments for the first time, there is something undeniably touching about seeing how years of shared experiences can create a bond that feels impossible to summarize. Sometimes, you do not need 1,000 words. Sometimes, you only need one sentence, half of my heart, and that was the sentence that changed the entire conversation. JikookVerse family, that is where we are going to leave today's story. But before you go, remember this. The most meaningful connections are not always the ones that make the biggest noise. Sometimes they are the ones built quietly over years. The ones that survive awkward phases, difficult days, long journeys, and endless changes. The ones where someone knows the person you used to be and still recognizes the person you have become. And in this fictional scenario, that is exactly what Jungkook was trying to express when he talked about Jimin. Not just a person beside him. Not just someone from his past, but someone deeply connected to the memories that helped shape his journey. Someone he could look at and remember where everything began. Someone whose presence had become part of the story. And perhaps that is why the confession feels so unexpectedly beautiful. Because beneath all the excitement, beneath all the fan reactions, beneath every replay and every discussion, there is one simple emotional idea. Sometimes a person becomes so important to your life that describing their place in your heart feels almost impossible. So you choose the simplest words you can find. Half of my heart. JikookVerse family, thank you for spending this moment with me. This is JikookVerse, and if this story touched your heart, stay with us for more moments, more conversations, and more stories centered around the bond that continues to inspire so many people. Until the next story, take care of yourselves, Keep your hearts open, and remember that sometimes the quietest words can carry the biggest emotions.